I'm always expecting to
Oh, I'm not always.
I've got enough people asking
You like Chair?
Okay, well, we'll make a start, ladies and gentlemen. So good evening and welcome members, officers, and those members of the public here at the meeting and those joining us virtually. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Newton, Councillor Heppel, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Christie, Councillor Ford, and Councillor Dart.
Thank you, Sandra. Item 2 on the agenda is public contributions, and we have one member of the public, Jonathan Richards, who wishes to speak on potholes, which is connected to agenda item 12C. Councillor Pybus notice a motion. So, Mr. Richards, you come to the microphone. You have your 3 minutes when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, councillors, I suggest that the problems of potholes is being approached from the wrong direction. Prevention is better than cure. Many potholes are caused by excess water eroding the carriageway. Perhaps the approach should be to ensure that the drains, ditches and culverts are kept clear throughout the year, the autumn particularly, as this is the season when leaves fall and hedges are flailed. Devon County Council is responsible for our roads and appears to have grasped this at last, as they are budgeting for a further 1.5 million to be spent on drainage and potholes. Currently, the drains are cleared by a vast machine which blocks minor roads and seems to require extra vehicles with assorted personnel to escort it and arrange traffic control, whilst jetting drains with drinking water. I cannot believe that this can be as cost effective as having someone locally looking after a number of parishes and able to sort the blocked drains, culverts, ditches, etc. on the minor roads. Major work and major roads would require larger equipment as currently. Last winter, my wife wrote off a brand new car tyre, avoiding an oncoming vehicle, in a previously reported pothole, which had been caused by water flow from a previously reported blocked drain. I claimed reparation from Devon County, and they eventually asked for a photograph. By this point, the pothole had been repaired and my claim failed. I regularly clear ditches and drains around Petrickstowe to ensure as little road damage as possible, particularly on the hill. Much of the debris obstructing one ditch this winter was left by council bank trimming in the autumn prior to farmer hedge trimming later on. This blocked not only the ditch but also a culvert, causing the water to course across the road. Devon County repaired one block drain near Petrickstowe but failed to keep it clear and the road flooded again. I reported the flood but eventually took drain rods etc. to try to clear the blockage. It took 15 minutes to clear the drain, which then flowed beautifully, and the flood was gone in a further 20 minutes. That's how simple it can be. In conclusion, I suggest that this council and Devon County should consider the appointment of local lensmen to cover a number of parishes. It would make financial sense to put local knowledge to good use and enable prompt action where and when the need arises. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Under time as well. Well done. Item 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Well, we've got all the score on that. Members, please declare the item on if it comes up on the agenda. Item 4 is agreement of items between part 1 and 2. There is one part 2 item, and due to the sensitive confidential information, an A9 question cannot be presented in part 1. When necessary, we'll go into part 2 to hear that question. Being proposed? All in favour, please show. And against? Abstentions? Is that 3 is against up there, was it?
No, yes, right, Chair, yeah.
And abstentions?
Yeah, no. So it's 22 for and 5 against, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, item 5, to consider correspondence or other business brought forward by the chair. I haven't got anything in particular.
No, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6 is the budget for 24-25, medium-term financial strategy, 24-25, 28-29, which is pages 5 to 30 in your agenda, and the finance manager will present the report. Over to you, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. So item 6 covers the revenue budget for 24-25, plus indicative budgets for the next 4 years after. The report needs to be read in conjunction with the 2 addendums. The first addendum picks up upon the recommendations from Community and Resources and Internal Overview and Scrutiny. And the second addendum picks up upon changes due to the final settlement from central government. So there were, as you will no doubt be aware, there were some changes to our funding position when between the draft settlement from central government and the final settlement. So the presentation will cover both, we'll bring them both together, but the addendum, wherever there are changes in the main report due to the final numbers in the settlement, the addendum picks up on those. The presentation also covers the funding position, so for example, council tax, business rates and fees and charges. It looks at the adequacy of reserves and the impact on the future deficit level. And it also discussed the robustness of the main assumptions in the budget. For example, those assumptions regarding funding, inflation and costs. It also looks at risks and sensitivity and describes the next steps. So moving on to slide 2. So if I can first give the council some background in terms of where we've come from. This time last year, this was where the budget stabilisation reserve was anticipated to be when the 23-24 budget was set. So we thought we'd end the year with 1.4 million in reserve, and we thought there was going to be a gradual take from the budget stabilisation reserve over the period of the MTFS. And there were some assumptions within that, such as regarding treasury management and staff pay. So treasury management, for example, there were some significant underestimates to the eventual receipts that we get, but staff pay under budgeted, and that had an impact upon the position where we're at currently. It's also interesting to note that when the budget was set this time last year, the structural deficit, i.e. the average deficit divided by the average funding position, was around 1.5%. So if we move on to the next slide. So if I can just update you all. So when we closed the financial year for 22-23, the anticipated deficit didn't occur. There was actually quite a large underspend, which we were able to use to bolster certain reserves. This meant that the budget stabilisation reserve didn't start this year with 1.4 million. It actually started with 2 million instead. And there have also been some changes to those assumptions that were mentioned. So staff pay has been, the settlement for staff pay is greater than was anticipated when we set the budget. So if you like, the one-offs from treasury management were better than anticipated, but the ongoing costs were worse than anticipated. It's also important to note the information within the graph as well. Members will be fully aware that over the last few years, we've had some significant increase in costs in temporary accommodation, but you'll see that the investments in capacity have started to pay off, and the anticipated cost for 23-24 is down around 300,000, and that's had a good impact upon the budget we're able to set for next year as well. Slide 4 just reminds you all of the key funding sources for the council. So the largest is fees and charges, then it's business rates, council tax is at 25%, and then funding from central government, which has fallen a lot in many years, is now just 7%. But this does remind you of the importance of council tax, which is one area where we do have a great deal of discretion over. So continuing with looking at the funding position for the council for next year. The settlement was only for 1 year, which doesn't help financial planning, and it was received very late in the day. The summary position is that the draft budget gave us a 2% increase in funding from central government, but the final settlement gave us another 6%. That was 8% increase in funding from central government overall. Business rates were going up by inflation, and there's continued relief for certain businesses in leisure, retail and hospitality. Slide 6 just remind you all of the relatively small proportion of council tax that actually goes to Torridge Council at around 8%. You'll see that significantly more goes to Devon County Council and to the police. The next slide shows what the recommended increase of 2.99% on council tax means to council taxpayers in Torridge. And of course, because of the sort of housing mix we have, something like 67% of those will be paying less than 10 pence a week extra on their council tax charge as a result of the recommended increase. So this next slide shows in the table, this was the position when the draft budget was set. So this was what went before Community and Resources and overview and scrutiny. The table shows the anticipated deficit per year across the years of the MTFS. So that equals around £4 million. And the chart above, in the blue line, shows the costs, and in the red line, shows the anticipated funding position. So there's some key points to note from this. Firstly, there's a gap in every year. The gap is increasing for the simple reason that the funding is not kept up by costs, for the simple reason of inflation. So when the draft budget was set, the structural deficit, i.e. that average deficit divided by average funding, was 6%. So a big increase on the 1.5% that we had this time last year. So this graph has now been updated. So this next slide looks different. It looks the same, but it's actually got different information within it. So again, you can see that the table shows the anticipated deficit per year, but that now totals 2 million, or under 2 million, rather than the 4 million of previously. And also, of course, there is still a gap between income and expenditure, but that gap has shrunk. And with the final settlement, there's now a 3% structural deficit. So that's fallen significantly. And it also, of course, highlights the impact of changes in assumptions and sensitivities when such last-minute changes to the funding position can lead to such noticeable increases or changes to the cumulative deficits over the period of the MTFS. There are some other key charts to illustrate our financial position. So early on in the presentation, we showed this equivalent chart from when we set the budget this time last year. So even though it started from a lower position, it didn't show us reducing all of the reserves over the period of the MTFS. So this is first graph shows the anticipated take from the budget stabilisation reserve when the draft budget was set. So the take of 4 million. And of course, this shows all of the reserve running out after 3 years. The next slide shows the position after the final funding settlement. So now the reserve still almost runs out, but we do still have 5 years to restore some stability. So that's the overall position to summarise to the council. But the reliability and robustness of the MTFS is based upon the assumptions that support it. So if I can lead you through some of those key assumptions. The MTFS assumes that we increase council tax by the maximum of 2.99% each year of the MTFS. It shows that the central government funding that was suggested at the draft settlement period continues to increase at a small level. It shows some small increase in the business rates base and the small increase for inflation. There's assumptions around those key costs such as staff pay and inflation, and also treasury management, of course, because that is now an increasingly important source of income to us. And we're assuming further reductions for temporary accommodation as the capital programme contains further investments in capacity. So the MTFS is also based upon projections and assumptions. And there are key variables that have an impact on the overall position. So this first chart in blue shows the anticipated deficit to the council based upon the recommendations contained in the report. And the red chart shows the impact of not increasing council tax by 1% less, but by not increasing council tax at all. So that's around 230,000 per year that is lost to the council to fund services if council tax isn't increased, which of course equates to over £1 million over the period of the MTFS. And because there are changes for the final settlement, I've reflected that same impact in the anticipated deficit position following the final settlement. So you will see that in the blue that the anticipated deficit is lower, but the impact, is still the same. So moving on and looking forward, we've talked about how the budget has developed and some of the key risks and assumptions within it. But of course, the key conclusion is that the financial position is unsustainable. And over the next 12 months, officers and members from the budget working group will be working to develop savings options. And this starts this week once the budget has been set. However, I think there's a lot to be positive about. The council does have a proven record in delivering savings. But I think the simple reality is that the council will be characterised financially more by capital investment than by the revenue budget over the next few years. It's going to be a situation of running to stand still, but of course the key exciting developments will be within capital budgets rather than within the revenue budgets. So moving on, so this table here shows that even though there's a lot of, there are significant savings targets to meet, this describes some changes that can occur that could reduce the anticipated deficit. And this table has only been presented once and it only shows from the draft budget position, but it still shows how much that deficit figure can come down. So for example, where we budget for things like planning income and treasury management, we budget based upon what we think we can collect. So that's a very prudent assumption, but in reality those areas are quite volatile and there's a significant upside to them. So But there's also other examples we could give of other things that could come along. Grants from central government, reductions in support to active toys, for example, all that could have an impact on the potential take from the budget stabilisation reserve. So thank you, Chair. So just to remind you all of the recommendations, this is to increase council tax by 2.99% to £189.50. To State Authority's net revenue budget at 12.194 million. Again, to continue its work to bring the council's revenue budgets back into balance.
Thank you, Gordon. Well, as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into producing these reports for us. Any questions that anyone would like to ask in particular? Councillor Hames?
Thank you. Yeah, I can't pretend to get my head around all these figures, etc., etc. But obviously, as climate lead, I'm very concerned about this council meeting its net zero targets. And in terms of relating to the budget, can we get an assurance from the finance officer that provision will be made for opportunities when they arise for our properties of incorporating energy efficiency measures, which in turn, at the same time, will bring big savings to this council? And in terms of transport, is there provision in the future for replacement vehicles, which, if they're electric or whatever, or hydrogen, There will be lower maintenance costs in the long term, again, bringing benefits to this council in terms of reductions of outlay, maintenance, etc. Can we have the assurance from the finance officer that provision will be made or has been made for these eventualities?
Well, just before Gordon answers that, I think I've certainly had conversations with Gordon and the team, and as far as cost savings and energy saving on our premises moving forward, I think the plan is that there is a plan to implement those savings and wherever possible make buildings more energy efficient. Moving on to your second question, I don't think that has actually been taken into account, with the vehicle fleet, because, as we all know, electric vehicles, it's divided opinion. Some people think the future is electric, and there is a movement around now that is not the case. Currently, and certainly for the foreseeable future, it's certainly not the case as far as heavy goods vehicles are concerned. And that obviously is the majority of our cost base, moving forward with the refuse fleet and all the recycling vehicles. They're diesel powered, and they're diesel powered for a reason at the moment, because electric is just currently not good enough. It can't be done electrically. Whether that changes in the future with some, change in technology, who knows? Am I right there, Gordon?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of reiterate to the council that the budget does include a contribution to the climate change reserve. It's relatively modest, but it will facilitate further work. Where investment is made in new properties, we're very, very conscious of the environmental impact, and I'm sure we could look any of you in the eye, in terms of the work that was done at Surrey House, in terms of the work in modern energy systems and things that was put in place then. And of course, where it comes to not perhaps in terms of the choice of vehicles, but in terms of how they're going to be running the waste and recycling service, it's very much the case that over the next few years they'll be looking to reduce the mileage that they run with.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I realise the problems at the moment of refuse vehicles, etc. Hopefully that will change in the next few years, but there's also our fleet of vans and smaller vehicles which we use in the shorter range in our activities. So I would hope there are opportunities there and provision particularly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I'd like to ask you about item 9, bullet point 6, pay awards. There's been a lot of controversy over the country, over various councils, both large and small, where there's been outstanding equal pay issues that have come to light, and in some cases they're practically bankrupted. Can I just get the assurance that we don't have anything like that outstanding or likely to be one of these risks that you mentioned? In other words, we won't be subject to that kind of contingency at all, and we have a decent equal pay policy for all our staff.
I can reassure you that this has been looked into recently, and we're very confident in the policy and the process we have in terms of the way grading is applied, structures are developed, so we don't believe there's any possibility of those kind of claims, for instance.
So there's no question of any equal value issues or anything like that coming up?
Absolutely no, not aware of.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the next to last slide that we saw there, I saw no reference at all to the income from any of our industrial estates. What happens to that money?
Thank you, Gordon.
Yeah, but that's built into, commercial property income is built into the budget. So there's...
Where? It wasn't on the slides.
Well, it'll be covered within fees and charges papers, and it's within the total aggregate positions for the relative services. But there's only so much. It depends on the level of detail that I could present before the council. But yeah, it's within the aggregate position.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. On page 9, I was intrigued to see that New Hope Plumbers was there. I thought New Hope Plumbers had Sean's smiling at me, and he knows why I'm asking you this probably when time's gone past. I thought Newham's bonus had disappeared completely. I see it's a fairly modest amount, but it has increased a little in the last couple of years. Do you anticipate it going on? I know you can't, you don't know how government's going to work in future, but do you anticipate it going on and growing or not? Thank you.
It's very, very difficult to answer that with any confidence. We only get 1 year settlements and the policy just change on a regular basis. But I can answer it in terms of the general position that central government has had towards local government funding. And as a rule, they have tried to minimise both positive and negative influences. So it feels unlikely that there will be sudden changes. The position to date has always been to sort of dampen down a lot of the wild swings of movement. So even though our new homes bonus has increased quite a lot between 23-24 and 24-25, in reality, because of the way the funding works, actually they take money off you in other ways. So actually it's less modest than it might have perhaps appeared.
Thank you very much.
Councillor David Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, councillors, I think we have to support this modest increase. I know it's painful always to pay tax, but nonetheless, we've got to, if you want things, you've got to pay for it. And I do feel what would be at risk if we don't is some of our non-statutory obligations, so things like our swimming pools and parks, that type of thing, the sort of things that make our communities livable in. So I do think we need to do that. And I say it is a modest one compared to some of the other people who are going to have a bite out of the cake. And of course, our dear Secretary of State, Michael Gove, announced a while ago that there was going to be £3 billion towards going into local government. What he failed to mention, of course, was most of that was going to come by the fact that the local councils were going to increase their budgets. So, smoke and mirrors job. But I do feel that we have little choice but to support this, and I think you've done a good job.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I'm going to propose this from the chair. Sorry, Councillor Craigie, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question with the change of figures, whether we're still intending to run a current deficit of 2 million while running a capital surplus of 3 million over the period. And what's the impact on our liquidity?
Yes, so the budget recommended shows a cumulative revenue deficit of just under £2 million over it. My colleague will talk a bit more about the apparent surplus in the capital programme. It isn't a real surplus, it's just because there's a mismatch between the funding and the expenditure. But Peter will explain that in more detail. And in terms of liquidity, well, yes, I mean, the biggest impact on liquidity over the next few years will be capital spend. So as a lot of those schemes, particularly the operational centre, which we're self-funding, that will have a large impact on our cash balances. So we will see reductions in our cash balances and in the anticipated level of interest we receive as a consequence of that drawdown.
Okay, well, I'm going to propose that we accept this report. Can I have a seconder for it, please? Okay, we've got to have a recorded vote on this, so Sandra, please. Or Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Andrews. Four. Councillor Back.
4.
Councillor Annie Brenton.
4.
Councillor David Brenton.
4.
Councillor Chris Bright.
4.
Councillor Lauren Bright. 4. Councillor Bushby.
4.
Councillor Cottle-Hunkin. 4. Councillor Craigie.
4.
Councillor Elliott.
4.
Councillor Gubb.
4.
Councillor Hackett.
4.
Councillor Haynes.
Abstain.
Councillor Harding.
4.
Councillor Hicks.
4.
Councillor Hodson.
4.
Councillor Inch.
4.
Councillor James.
4.
Councillor Johns.
4.
Councillor Leather.
4.
Councillor Lavelle.
4.
Councillor Locke.
4.
Councillor Pennington.
4.
Councillor Piper.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
Councillor Wheatley.
4.
And Councillor Whitaker.
4.
26 for and 1 abstention, Chair.
Thank you. That's clearly carried. Thank you. Thank you, Gordon. Then moving on to item 7, capital programme for 24 to 25. 28 to 29, which is pages 31 to 38. And you receive a report from the Deputy Section 151 Officer. Peter, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, councillors. So just giving a presentation on the capital programme update. So the capital programme covers the next 5 years. It consists of...
Sorry, could you speak up? Well, I thought it would be people down the other end.
So the capital programme covers the next 5 years. It consists of approved projects known as PIDs. These are funded by various different options, a combination of either reserves, contributions from revenue, capital receipts and grants. So the capital programme brought forward from this time last year, we had a capital programme of 26.9 million with a funding of 29 million, giving us a surplus of 2 million. Next slide, please. So for this year, we've got two updates to add to the capital programme. We've got one new PID, which is a project. This is for 70,000 and it's a replacement buys thin client PCs. So this is part of the desktop strategy. These are the sort of the hardware that the council uses and council officers use day to day. We've also got community land trusts, which is a revolving loan fund. So this has a bit of history to it. Back in 2019, we added £600,000 worth of borrowing, which was authorised by full council for a community land trust revolving loan fund. So these are to assist with affordable housing. So the key points of this is that all loans are approved by Community and Resources. Loans range from 75,000 up to 150. They're secured with a legal charge against the land or property. The interest rate, we charge a comparable rate to what the council would borrow at. It's from the Public Works Loan Board. And they're tendered over short-term lending, sort of 5 years or less. So these are the two additions. Next slide, thank you. So the updated programme for this year, so during 23-24, there's been quite a few additions to the capital programme. The main one being Aquador Clean Maritime Innovation Centre. And this has increased our capital programme up to 47.2 million with funding of 50 million. And this gives us a surplus overall on the programme, which is looking at the next 5-year programme of 3 million. Now, to put that in a bit of context, I've got to talk about the vehicle programme. We have a vehicle programme for all our refuse vehicles and vans in the programme. So that vehicle programme looks over a longer time period than the 5 years. So we look out to 32, 33, which is sort of the next big refresh for all the recycling vehicles. So in essence, we're saving up to buy those recycling vehicles. So when we split it out, actually 2 million of that surplus is just us saving up to buy those recycling vehicles, which means the general programme, which there you can see is £42 million worth, actually has a surplus of 1 million. Next slide, thank you. So to summarise, we've got the general programme, which has a surplus of 1 million, but we've got quite a few pressures over that 5-year time period. We've got 3 leisure centres, where we've had estimates of around 60 grand of capital spend being required per site per year. We've got the transition to net zero. We've got new projects. Any new projects over the next 5 years would be needed to be funded from that surplus in the absence of any extra additional funding. We've also got a linear defence programme, which we're working with the Environment Agency, which is a bit unknown at the moment on what it will require. We've got future inflation, and the Aquador Clean Maritime Innovation Centre also has some pressures on the funding envelope. That said, there is also Torridge. Also, on a positive note, Torridge has been identified as one of 20 councils to form a levelling up partnership with the government, and will be recipient of, well, there's a £400 million worth of funding, of which some of that we will get. The majority of this will be capital in nature, so it's likely to be signed off on a project by project basis, and it's relatively short term, so that will most likely require updates to the capital programme during the next 12 months. So that's to summarise it really. So I'll go to the recommendations, and that's that members consider the recommendations from community and resources and internal overview and scrutiny, which is that the capital programme is updated to include the Wise Thing client PCs and the Community Land Trust revolving loan fund.
Thank you, Peter. No hands. Who's going to be the first one to ask a question on this then? Mr. Pennington?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to go back to page 33. Leisure centres estimate 60k per site per year. Can I just ask, why are we not considering adding that to the cost of the users rather than putting it onto our capital programme? If we want to pay for the 60k a year, it should be paid for by the users, surely.
Any response to that one?
I'll
Chief Exec wants to have a go at responding to that one.
Well, that's quite an interesting concept, I guess. So the actual properties still belong to Torridge District Council, and the District Council are responsible for those. And as members will be aware, there's a contract with Active Torridge to run the centres. So there's not a crossover of capital cost onto Active Torridge. So Active Torridge are not picking up the capital cost Torridge District Council on.
So there is a movement between Active Torridge and Torridge District Council, and it will be transparent how we see that movement go between the two bodies, I take it.
Torridge District have a contract with Active Torridge, and in that was an agreed budget that's already been agreed by full council for the next 2 years as to how much Active Torridge District are going to fund Active Torridge.
So we had agreed to fund the £60,000 already if we have these figures in front of us.
Peter was illustrating an estimate of the cost of operating into the capital costs of those leisure centres. We have a contract with Active Torridge to provide facilities that allow Active Torridge to operate leisure services in those buildings. So the contract stipulates that the council will put in place usable premises to run those services.
Okay.
And a contract in place that provides a management fee to Active Torridge to do that.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Hyde, you're first on there.
Thank you, Chair. My just one query on the Community Land Trust revolving loan fund. I noticed there was a cap of 600,000 and then loans from 75,000 to 150,000. My question was just whether that's enough, knowing how much housing projects are to get off the ground, and obviously it's a fund that can perhaps help towards local housing, local community land trusts. Is that cap going to cause problems? Would be my question.
Gordon, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, the intention behind the scheme is not that it's the sole funder of these schemes. So it doesn't try and do two things. It doesn't spread it over the life of 25 years, because then it wouldn't be a revolving loan fund. It's perhaps envisaging those situations where a local organisation is looking for a package of funding to enable a scheme to get off the ground. And we could be that last link in the chain that enables it to happen.
Thank you.
Councillor Andy Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this adds on to Councillor Piper's query, actually. You comment that so to date no loans have been applied for. Is that because the other stakeholders who should or may be involved are not coming forward, or it can't be that there's a lack of interest? I'm sure that's not the case. So what is the hold up here in terms of local communities taking advantage of the loans we're prepared to provide as a capital expenditure, and also possibly others? I mean, it just seems a bit odd in the situation where we have so many local people who can't find housing, especially out in parishes. That it says here, to date, no loans have been applied for. I find that rather incredible. And I just wonder what the reason is. I appreciate there's other stakeholders involved, not just Tory, but is it being publicised enough? Is there enough information for the community that this is available to start a project up?
Well, I suppose, Ken, do you want to answer that, do you?
Yeah, I'll obviously declare an interest. I'm the director of the Holsworthy Community Trust. 2019-2020, we were expecting a substantial amount of money from the government to support CLTs, but all of a sudden that's disappeared, and that is now being looked at again. The LGA are very supportive of community land trusts, and so we are looking at that again. The problem with that money was that if I talk personally, and it's, you know, I have an interest, is that we found that we couldn't get enough money to actually to balance with it, to move forward. As it happens at the moment, there is opportunities within this fund, and bear in mind it is a small money-making exercise for Torridge. They were actually gaining a little bit interest on that. And it's very difficult because I am so involved. But there is opportunities arising now, so it's quite possible some of that money will be used. There is a Devon-wide drive now to sponsor CLTs and to get more involved. And so we're hoping that will grow. I sit on the Devon Housing Task Force that is actually doing a lot of work. And as I said, the LGA are very supportive now. But the problem is the government is still being reluctant, and we're hoping that when we do go to the CCA, the Combined Council Authority, if we go to that, but when we do, Homes England will be sponsoring money directly into the CCA, which is Devon, Torbay, and to a lesser extent the districts, and that some of that money may come available for CLTs. But, there is a real big drive now all of a sudden, and some of us have been doing it for 20 odd years and still struggling. But any money would be welcome, but within this loan, what I could say, it can be used, know that things are slightly better, so hopefully it will be used shortly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. I hope you're right.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll propose from the chair that we accept this report. Carrie seconded that?
Yes, please.
All in favour, please show, or is it, it's a recorded vote, sorry.
No.
Oh, it's a normal vote for this one. All in favour, please show. And against? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain on the places of my interest.
Thank you.
That's 25, 4 and 2 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, it's clearly carried. Okay, moving on then, item 8 on the agenda, Treasury Management Report and Capital Strategy, pages 39 to 65. And Peter, you're going to do this again?
Yes.
Thank you. Over to you then.
Thank you. So these reports are detailed technical reports, and they're setting out the Treasury Management Strategy for 24-25. Counterparty list we have with where we invest our money, prudential indicators, MRP, our MRP policy, and our capital strategy. So the key highlights is that there's been no new borrowing during the year. Interest rates have risen, but they're expected to soften in 24-25. And the prudential indicators are there to help the council manage its debt to borrowing. These set various limits of borrowing, such as net borrowing, authorised limit and operational boundary, which the council has to operate within. They also show the financing costs as a percentage of net revenue. For Torridge, as we have elevated deposit rates, it's actually a negative, which means it's a net income. And there's a liability benchmark, which is there to show our current future borrowing versus our reserves or investments. And the recommendations in the report is that the council approves the Treasury Management Investment Strategy, the counterparty list, the prudential indicators and the MRP, and the council approves the capital strategy. To take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions that anyone wish to ask before I move? Councillor Hames?
Yeah, oh, yeah, I was just wondering, finance officer, bearing in mind conversation I had with him recently about the ethical investments, which is referred to on page 46. I think he was optimistic that we would perhaps find an opportunity to invest fairly soon in suitable funds which have an ethical dimension. And finance officer tell the rest of us, or can you reassure the rest of us that might be the case in the near future, please?
Yes, I can reassure you. Currently in our, as part of our counterparty limits, we are required by our counterparty list to choose the ethical deposits as long as we don't lose out a certain amount of interest, and that's set at 0.2%. So that means we have to look at what the rates are in the market when we are in a place to invest, because we tend to invest for set periods of time. So the next time a treasury deposit comes up, we'll have to look at the rates, and if the ethical investments deposits are the best rates within that context, then we're required to invest with them. I know we looked in the last week, and for 3 out of the 4 time periods we invest over, the ethical ones would be the preferential ones which we'd have to go for. But the caveat is I don't know where that will be in a couple of months' time, because rates, as you know, rates are always moving around, so to speak.
Yeah, just one small question. On page 46, the last of our investments is with Lancashire County Council. Why that particular county council shows I do not know, but are we on any risk with all the several county councils struggling to make their own ends meet anyway? So why are we borrowing from another county council?
Well, we're lending to another county council, just part of our approved counterparties. No council has ever actually defaulted on any investment, so from that perspective, it's relatively secure. Before we lend it out to them, we did look into their finances to make sure they're not one of the councils you see in the news at the moment. And that one in particular was only a 3-month. It's only a 3-month loan, so I think months to go.
Just following on from Councillor Lott's question, why 91 days when the rest are 365?
That's down to our cash flow. So as we collect, so we need a bit of cash flow towards the end of the year. So for that perspective, so as part of the treasury management policy, I have to balance what we have in our current account versus the money we need to put out there. So as we collect council tax over, or a large amount over 10 months, we tend to build up a little bit of money during the year, and then it tends to go out over the last couple of months. So therefore, I had to put money out for a short term so we don't breach our current account limits by putting it out there as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I'll move that we accept that report. Someone like to second it? Yes, you've got all in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. On item 9 is the council tax resolution for 24-25, pages 66 to 71 in your agenda. Gordon will present the report. Over to you, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. So in agenda item 6, we set the council tax level for Torridge District Council. This agenda item picks up upon all of the council tax presets across the precepting bodies. This is a set format that we are obliged to follow to give you particular bits of information. And as you can see, we are formally stating from the various precepting bodies, from the county, from the fire, from the police, and from the town and parish councils, what their precept level will be for next year. There's a lot of detail there, but hopefully the key points are clear. Just also to bring to your attention that it states provisional against the fire and the county, but both of those have now been confirmed, so they're the final figures against us. So you'll see there's a lot of detail. So against all of the parish bodies, there's all of the various precept levels. And you can also see in the appendix 1 and section 4, with the set format that we've given, these are the some key budgetary figures for the council. So 4A, for example, is equivalent to the gross budget for the council for next year. And B is the gross budget less the town, parish and district presets. So this is a format that we don't have any discretion over. It's a relatively technical document, but it is a key one for setting out the claims on the council tax collection fund for next year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I'll propose from the chair that we accept that. Seconded by Councillor James. All in favour, please show. Oh, sorry, recorded vote. Sorry. Keep swapping around.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Andrews. 4. Councillor Back.
4.
Councillor Annie Brenton. 4. Councillor David Brenton.
4.
Councillor Chris Bright.
4.
Councillor Lauren Bright. 4. Councillor Bushby.
4.
Councillor Cotter Pumpkin. 4. Councillor Craigie.
4.
Councillor Elliott.
4.
Councillor Gubb. 4. Councillor Hackett.
4.
Councillor Haynes.
4.
Councillor Harding.
4.
Councillor Hicks.
4.
Councillor Hudson. 4. Councillor Inch.
4.
Councillor James.
4.
Councillor Johns.
4.
Councillor Leather.
4.
Councillor Lavelle. 4. Councillor Locke.
4.
Councillor Pennington.
4.
Councillor Piper.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
Councillor Wheatley.
4.
And Councillor Whitaker. 4. Such unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, moving on to item 10, to answer questions submitted under procedural rule A9. We have 3 questions that have been received. However, as previously mentioned, 1 question will be presented in part 2. The first one is from Councillor Haynes. So you've got your written report here.
My supplementary question.
Councillor Haynes, if you ask a supplementary, you wish to?
Well, it's really just a comment. I'm not allowed to do that. Why was it not okay, question. Why was it not considered when the decision was taken to go straight to demolition with our under committee development? Why was it not considered that the public transparency should have been given full potential, so that people within the community and councillors on the planning committee could have raised concerns about the effect of the demolition on wildlife, on possibly on asbestos, the implications of transportation from the demolition site, and also the impact on historical buildings on the site. That's my question.
Thank you. And you can see the response, the answer that's been provided. Okay, the second question is from Councillor Pennington.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the response. Not a lot to say. COVID has taken its course, and I noticed the budget is lower in the COVID years. Now you've got 14,000 for this year. There was a lovely piece that went out about training for councillors, and 1 or 2 have asked could they go on it. And I wanted to make sure there was a budget available. I didn't realise there was a budget actually when I started on the course, so I've learned something today as well. Yeah. I'm grateful for that, and I take it there'll be money available to train councillors. I really went on a really good course to start with some years ago, and it set me up for being a councillor. And I hope that people will avail themselves of the training that's available. And I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you very much for your responses.
Was that a question?
You've seen the question, you've heard the question, you've seen the answer. Okay, where are we now? Okay, move on now. Item 11 is petitions. We have no petitions. Moving on to item 12, notices of motion. We had three notice of motions, but the first one has been removed. So, Councillor.
Can I just come back just to say, Chair,
Yes,
that
Councillor.
I've been advised that I should get a proposal that I can withdraw it, but I might be different to how you interpret. I apologise to Councillor Brenton because she said she would second it most definitely, but I've been assured by Councillor Locke that we will get training and the issue will be fully discussed on March the 5th. And rather than waste your time tonight discussing it, I think it'll be far better that we go through the training, and if it still resolves for me, I will bring it back at a future stage.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to challenge that decision, then I accept that, but I would withdraw given the discussions I've had tonight.
Yeah,
I second that withdrawal.
can I just add then, that there is training on the 5th of March, given by Ashford solicitors, and all this will be covered in that training. So I'm pleased that so many councillors are going to attend that training session.
Thank you, Councillor Rock. Okay, so the next one I believe is from.
Sorry, Chair, point of order. Aren't we supposed to be voting on?
Apparently not.
This motion?
Apparently not. If Councillor Pennington wishes to withdraw it, he can.
Well, sorry, Chair. But in our constitution, it does say that we're supposed to vote on that, and it always was for the very simple reason that Councillor Pennington withdraw that notice of motion.
Yeah.
Now, another councillor might have come along and said, "Oh, we're going to put a notice of motion vis-a-vis the planning visits." Oh, no, there's one already in there. Oh, I needn't bother. That's why it's there to be voted on to withdraw. That always was the understanding that I always had, that was the case. So it's just a formality, but nonetheless, it should be the fact, because some members might feel, no, we should be debating this now. So that's the reason for it. Quite logical. So why are we doing it?
Well, my understanding is that because he's not proposing anything, it doesn't need to be voted on.
I think I'd be quicker, Chair, if I had proposed it and got.
Okay, so.
For that.
Right, the second notice of motion is Councillor Pennington.
Thank you, Chair. Second one. There you go. Can I first say that this is not against anybody personally, it's against scrutiny and how scrutiny works, and all the other chairs that may be involved when it comes to issues about something that's in-house. I'll tell you where it comes from. When COVID broke out 4 years ago, we were coming back through France and amazed to see the difference between France and England in response to the COVID epidemic. I couldn't believe it. France shut down about 3 weeks before we did in England. And then I spent the next 6 months watching television because I couldn't go anywhere else. And I had to watch the Health Select Committee, chaired by a guy called Jeremy Hunt, who is now your Chancellor, by the way, interviewing Matt Hancock. Now, Matt Hancock was the Secretary for State for Health. And what particularly concerned us, because my mother-in-law is living independently and we had to shield and protect as well, that he was kept on saying he was protecting the protective arm around care homes, and yet there was discharge of people from hospitals at the time that were not tested for COVID, and we all know what happened at the time. Jeremy Hunt was a previous Secretary of State for the Health, then he became the scrutiny person that was scrutinising the situation, and I felt how tame the questions were. The situation was difficult because he had been the previous Secretary of State. He may have been part of the problem that caused health to be in trouble in the first place. So therefore, you've got to be careful to make sure scrutiny properly works. And I read then in 2022, the High Court found against the Secretary of State because they hadn't properly discharged people from hospital into the care homes. Fast forward, we had our first external overrun scrutiny on active torage on the 1st of February 2023. 8 months into the situation of new active torage, and we were keen to find out how things were going on. There were, I think, 8 on the committee today, and there were 2 who were members of the active torage board, but they weren't sharing it. We had a bit of an interesting meeting. And I go to page 3 of the minutes. It says, following a request for a more detail in relation to profitability and viability, it was explained this wasn't something that could be shared in an open meeting due to commercial sensitivities. Now, I didn't actually get to approve the minutes because I was off the external committee when it came back in June, I think it was, for the minutes to be approved. Now, I remember being on that committee and sitting there and trying to ask several times, let me ask a question the same time from another position.
Philip, remember you've got 2 minutes. You know, if you meant to, you way over that at the moment, but yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you had 2 minutes, you're way over that already, so.
All right.
Just get to the point.
All I'm saying is to put the nail on the head, okay? We're in a situation whereby it's public perception. If there is financial things, CNR shouldn't be doing it. If there's a planning application coming through to Nolden, Torrington, or Horsforth, planning chair should not, if they're active towards board. If we want to borrow a license, licensing chair shouldn't be sitting on it. We need to separate the two because we have seen what happened to central government. And I'm not going to talk about the post office now because the post office is more than enough to show you how scrutiny is poor sometimes in this country. We need to be seen to be making sure scrutiny is good. And I'm not against any of the chairs because they do all the work, but I think it's from the public perception that I'm really arguing here that we separate the two and make sure that when there is an issue where there is a conflict, we are seen to be clearly dividing the two situations. Thank you for indulging, Chair.
Thank you. Someone got
I'll second that.
Are you proposing that, eh?
I'm proposing that, yeah.
I'm proposing that motion.
All right, second.
Councillor David Branton has seconded that. Okay?
And there's two parts to the motion, Chair. So that the chair can still stay on the committee and take part because they're valuable, okay, and stay within the committee, but they add to the meeting, but the chair can at least bring in either could be part 2 or something or other, but we need to be asking questions in the light of today's economics, particularly when we got revenue budgets that's run a bit short of money, etc., etc.
Okay, right, okay, it's been proposed and seconded. Let's have a show of hands. Everyone who wants to support Councillor.
Can I ask a question?
Councillor Piper, yes.
Sorry, just on, so you're effectively asking for the chair to stop being the chair for that agenda item.
Yes, and back it again.
But to stay on the committee and have voting rights?
Yes.
Thank you. That was just to
That's all,
clarify.
yes.
Yeah, stay on.
Because I think they bring valuable stuff to the committee.
Yeah, just not chair that agenda.
But not chair that agenda item.
Thanks.
It's a declaration of interest. Yeah, sure. Why do we need this?
Well, it's been proposed and it's been seconded. I mean, whether we need it or no is almost irrelevant, but, you know, so it's been proposed and seconded. All who, hands up who wants to support Councillor Pennington's motion then. And against? And abstentions?
Yeah. 5 for, 19 against and 4 abstentions, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
That's clear enough. Councillor Pennington, thank you. The next item is, the next motion is Councillor Piper.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I'll just remind you.
2 minutes. I promised myself when I got involved in this kind of thing that I would steer clear of the subject of potholes.
Succeeded, have you?
And here I am. Yeah, I'm sure most of you could write a dissertation on the subject. But the notice of motion is really to acknowledge the problems with potholes, and our speaker summed it up very well. But I also wanted to steer that conversation away from something we all know about, rural roads, which are in a very bad state. But it's come to my attention that actually our A roads seem to be becoming less and less maintained. This winter being a case in point where block gullies create huge floods across A roads, not always in terrible weather conditions, followed by freezing conditions. So we've had in our region accidents caused by flooding, followed a week later by accidents caused by ice, on exactly the same problem. And also, our footpaths in our towns are becoming impassable. So we're encouraged to have active travel, and I think that's very important. But the only people that can use our footpaths are able-bodied people in sturdy footwear. People with pushchairs, people with mobility scooters, people in wheelchairs, people that are even slightly infirm, or even just got their work shoes on, can't pass them. So my notice of motion is fairly clear. It's not particularly adversarial at this point. I hope to think that we could invite Devon County to come and talk to people about solutions. I've tried to talk to people about solutions. Let's be honest about the situation. If nothing's going to happen on, for example, footpaths, we need to have an honest conversation about it, get them to external overview and scrutiny so people can talk to them. But with regards to the A roads, I fear people are becoming isolated, cut off, because they're not confident enough to be able to travel on our A roads. And are we getting the correct level of funding to maintain our A roads to the minimum standards, which is a safety standard? I drive up to Bideford tonight on an A road after 2 dryish days, admittedly after a lot of heavy rain, and the gullies are still flowing. I don't think we're getting our 72% of council tax money in this region, and we need to shout about it. Thank you.
I will second that. With Councillor Brenton.
Chair,
Councillor David
on
Brenton
a
first.
point of order, I would propose that we suspend council procedure rules so that we could debate this properly. And thereby, I'm sure it's a very emotive subject. We've all had complaints from our constituents about the situation with the potholes. So I would suspend standing orders so a debate could take place.
Well, I can't personally see the point of doing that, but, you know, we'll come to that in a minute. I don't suppose there's anyone around the table that's going to oppose what Councillor Piper has suggested, because they've all seen the state of the roads and we're all absolutely sick to the back teeth of them. But, you know, clearly it is a Devon County Council issue. We can write to Devon County, as you're advising, and, you know, put as much pressure on them as we can, but that's as far as we can go. Sorry.
I'd just like to say that I don't think it's just potholes. I think we should include white lines on that. For example, and it's not that important, but as you drive into Cadstone Estate, there are no white lines there anymore at all, and haven't been for quite a while.
All right. Someone else had their hand up there. Councillor Colin.
Actually, I was wondering if I could propose an amendment, if Councillor Piper agrees, and that's that we also invite the leader and chief executive of Devon County Council to actually come and visit us here in Torridge.
Not a lot of chance of that.
Well, we can invite them.
Invite them.
And see how comfortable they feel driving their own cars on some of our roads, because I don't think they'd be too chuffed about it. If you'd be happy for that amendment to be added.
Okay. Sorry, someone else on this side had their hand up. Councillor Paddington, was it?
Just to say, do we have HATOC, which is the consultation process?
We do.
And do we meet, and who is the 2 members on HATOC that should be taking all these information back to Devon County?
Councillor McGough is the chair, but we just got representation of it.
McGough is not on the council any longer, Chair.
No, I don't think we've got any representation.
On the county.
Sorry. Councillor Hackett?
Yes, I sit on HATOC.
Right, okay.
And coincidentally, the next meeting has been cancelled.
Get here, shoot in the potholes.
I'll get you in a second, Councillor. Councillor Haynes, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I fully agree with Councillor Piper, but just to point out that parish and town councils do have a role here at Northern where I'm a councillor, we get a grant annually from the county council to do footpaths, surface them and put drainage in. And we've also recently had a plating machine from the county to deal with potholes. So parish councils do have those opportunities.
Thank you. Councillor
Thank you,
Annie
Chair.
Brenton.
So I fully concur with Councillor Piper's notice of motion, and I think there's a lot more issues to this. Our public speaker was very informative on rural areas and the pathways and roads in that area. But one of the issues is that I've just been involved in potholes up on Morton Park Road and Morton Avenue, and they are horrendous. There's no other word for them. They're absolutely appalling. Now, I flagged them up, I wrote a letter to the county council, and they did supposedly repair to, but quite honestly, it was such a shabby, inadequate, I could use bad language, but I won't job, they, you know, they clearly, I don't know who did it, they clearly didn't know what they were doing, and now it's almost worse than it was before. So I think there's an issue here that our speaker said that they had taken a different approach, and they may have taken somewhat of a different approach, but they really need to look at the real quality of the work they do in order to improve these potholes. Because what they're doing at the moment doesn't work. It does not work to just lob a bit of tarmac in there and hope for the best.
I don't. Openness, Councillor Brenton suspend standing orders and it was seconded by Councillor Mrs. Brenton.
Yes.
So the show of hands, all in favour of supporting of that motion. Of suspending standing orders so we
Doesn't
can,
hurt.
so we can stay here for an hour talking about it.
Oh, well.
And against?
Sorry, David.
I don't care. Let's hear where these people are gonna have a hell of a time. Oh, my God.
Right. I seconded your motion, Councillor Piper, so show of hands in support of Councillor.
First, we just finished the vote on standing orders.
Yeah, we did that. Oh, sorry. So we did the four, we did against, and all those abstentions, please.
Four, first of all, is it? Yeah, okay.
So we've done that. I just want to do abstentions. Right.
Me just getting seated.
Well, Chair, that's 3-4, 22 against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Piper's motion.
There's an amendment. Councillor Hankins' amendment. To write the-
Yeah, I'm getting to that. Councillor Piper's motion with Councillor Codahunkers amendment, which you agreed to. Show of hands in support of that we write to Devon County Council.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Go for that. Right, I propose that we move into part two. Can I have a seconder? Councillor James, all in favour? Moving into part two. And against? No one, abstentions? One abstention.
26 for and one abstention.
Right,
Chair.
so we
Can I just, yeah, I'll let you know when